how do we create knowledge? One of the ways we do that is through learning, and playfulness is how we all learned as children. If we're going to get better at accepting that we are both analytical and creative, both the scientist and the artist, it's being more comfortable with the uncertainty of that situation. We have educated out of ourselves their creativity, and our creativity is what informs our sustainability and helps makes us sustainable leaders and helps us see the bigger picture. There's a flexibility with art, the possibilities. Sustainability is about, doing things so that they can continue, not recreating the wheel all the time. The thing with knowledge is that it multiplies when you share it. The art stuff is a way to get people to do that takes them out of their comfort zones and opens up some possibilities that might not be opened up.
Hi, this is Loris Morini, and you're listening to the Discovering Data podcast. We're here because we want to take responsibility for how data influences the world, and we want to enable individuals on our teams to achieve their highest potential. This show is for you if you want to understand the industry, find your tribe, and accelerate your growth. We bring you conversations with thought and practice leaders from all over the world and create opportunities to connect and to learn as a community. Our new home is at discoveringdata.com, where you'll find a forum to connect with data leaders like you, episode transcripts, best quotes, and other material that can help you learn and apply your knowledge at work. If you have any feedback or ideas you'd like to share, please reach out to me directly on LinkedIn or Twitter. And now join me for this new episode. Let's stay curious and keep discovering data. There's many ways to talk about knowledge management, but one of the ways that makes more sense to me is to look at the world we live in, how complex it is, how ambiguous, uncertain, and volatile. You can't really make plans anymore. That's one lesson we all learned. And in an environment like this, making plans and try to solve problems is much harder. So the question is, how can we enable people to do their job more effectively in an environment like this? And knowledge management is all about that, but turns out we've been doing it wrong for a long time. We worry too much about perhaps the technology and how to store and access knowledge, and we neglected the mindsets, the attitudes, the behaviors, and all the soft skills that we need to develop to put knowledge to use, not just store it or access it. We need to stimulate that curiosity and creativity, but how can we do this? And today I want to learn about this topic, and I'm speaking with Stephanie Burns, the creator of Radical Knowledge Management. Stephanie is Chief Chaos Organizer at Entalkey, a consultancy that helps people and organizations become more collaborative, innovative, flexible, and transparent. Her work is all about improving employee engagement and adapting to an ever-evolving environment. Stephanie is an artist, a subject matter expert in knowledge management and culture change. She advocates for curiosity, playfulness, and creative learning as the cornerstones of the journey towards knowledge, principles that, as she says, have been educated out of us through production line thinking. Today we talk about radical knowledge management, its guiding principles, its benefits, and how to put it in practice. Stephanie, welcome to Discovering Data. Thanks for being with me.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Loris.
Absolutely a pleasure. So let's start with basic definitions. What is knowledge management, how you think about it, and what have we done wrong so far? Why isn't it working?
I've been working in knowledge management for almost 25 years. And I started out with the definition that it's connecting people to the knowledge they need to do their jobs. And I still believe that. It's just that our environment has changed, our context, the externalities have changed to be more VUCA, as you mentioned in your introduction. And so it's not where 25 years ago, it was much more about stocks and flows of knowledge and creating repositories and, development and life cycle processes to keep it updated and things. Those things are still certainly important, but But now it's more about giving people the skills, I think, to create and to thrive in that in this VUCA world, where there was more, I'm going to say, it's certainty 25 years ago. Now there's really not the same amount of certainty, and yet we're still trying to make things certain, and that's, I think, the wrong way to go about it.
And VUCA again stands for, was it volatility?
Volatility, or volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous.
Perfect description of what's happening in the world right now.
It is.
AKA a mess.
Yeah, a big mess on so many levels, and so, yeah, I feel like knowledge management needs to keep up with how the world has changed, and creating repositories, is not the way to keep up with the way the world has changed. It's about giving people the skills and enabling them to be flexible and adaptable, to accommodate VUCA, to be able to change and adopt. So.
Yeah, and in one of the papers you sent me before this call, which I will add to the show notes for those that are interested and want to read more about it, you speak about the role that creativity and playfulness actually play in the knowledge management process for an organization. Do you want to tell me a little bit more about why do we need to think about creativity to manage the knowledge in a team, in an organization?
Well, so the first part of the knowledge management life cycle, or knowledge development life cycle, is creation, sorry. And so the question is, how do we create knowledge? Well, that's one of the ways we do that is through learning, and playfulness is how we all learned as children. And so creativity ties into that playfulness, that curiosity of, how do we do things new, create something new from scratch. If I already know what I need to document, then it's not the same thing as, I can write down stuff that's in my head that I already know. But if I'm in a situation where I have a problem that I'm trying to solve, and I don't think, at least, that I have what I need in my head, it's not top of mind, certainly, just to write down a couple of paragraphs or create a document or whatever I might do. If I'm in the situation where I need to create something new, then we need to tap into that knowledge within ourselves and within our teams. And so creativity and arts-based interventions I'm talking about with Radical KM is how to do that. How to get people out of their comfort zones, get out of their the boxes that they live in every day, and look at things differently, question the status quo, question how they've always done things, question, their assumptions about a situation or an outcome.
Yeah, it's interesting because in the data management community, we talk a lot about data quality and structuring the data and interoperability and systems knowing what people know. So there's a strong focus on the automation side of things. The linear thinking, if you allow me the term, it's a linear type of problem solving where the problem, the solution. All you have to do is to connect the right knowledge, the right information, right data at the right time when the problem arises. But we know that is kind of not possible because you can't predict all possible problems. That's why we still need humans in the loop. Otherwise, we could run businesses completely with bots. There's something about being humans that is special, that is different. What is it? What is that thing that makes us different from bots?
That we're not linear. We've got creativity, which is really what differentiates us from the technology, because it can't, at least at this point. And honestly, I don't think that it's going to be anytime soon that technology is going to be able to replicate it, because it's not linear. We're not sure how that happens, how, giving my brain some space and going and doing something else, engaging in something else, and for me, oftentimes lately, I've been waking up with the idea of how to solve a problem that I've, gone to bed thinking about the night before, that I didn't know what the solution was. I woke up in the morning going, this is what it is,
Clicks. Yeah.
So yeah, our brains, we don't understand. And this is why, I do the arts-based stuff that I do and try to help people make those connections and create the space for those things to float up, and those connections to sort of float to the surface from wherever they are. So
yeah, there's a clash here, right? I see an obvious problem between the expectation of a lot of business leaders, particularly those that are financially driven, that worry about measuring things and putting ROIs close to every line item in every spreadsheet, which is something we need to do as businesses. We need to stay afloat, we need to make profits, and we need to use those profits to reach our vision and execute our mission. But it can be blinding if we focus only on those numbers, particularly when we're trying to find solutions that are not obvious and that require that elasticity, that freedom to not measure everything, to not worry about, am I making progress? Because your subconscious is doing work even when you sleep, and a solution could be around the corner. But motivating this to a financially driven business leader can be quite tough sometimes. You're the first one that brings those two worlds together and publicly says, hey, it's not either you're an artist or you're a scientist or an engineer. You can be both. Actually, everybody is a bit of both. It's just that we kill one of the two because we want to conform to society or the expectations that people have on us. So how do we undo that damage?
Yeah, and that's a good question. And I don't know that I have an easy answer for it, honestly. I think keeping an open mind and being curious and recognizing that not everything that matters can be measured. And some of the things that can be measured, honestly, don't matter. And that's a paraphrase, a quote from somebody else. Those are not my words, but yeah, we get so caught up in trying to create this certainty because we're uncomfortable with uncertainty. And so, and I think that's where, if we're going to get better at accepting that we are both analytical and creative, both the scientist and the artist, it's being more comfortable with the uncertainty of that situation, of that apparent conflict, of, well, I can't be both. Well, who says you can't be both? I'm both, because I have my undergrads in accounting and I have an MBA in IT. And I can tell you, when I started being more artistic and creative, life got a whole lot more fun and enjoyable, and my work got a whole lot more fun and enjoyable, combining them together, rather than saying, oh no, I can't be both things. So I think we need to question why we have these beliefs, and throw them out the window, quite honestly, and accept that, and I think the idea of bringing the whole self to work, the whole person at work, is trying to get at that notion. I look at Radical KM as building on that, as supporting that idea.
Yeah, you also write about sustainable leadership, I believe, in one of the two papers you sent me, and identified sort of the three pillars or building blocks of sustainable leadership. You speak about sustainable mindset, system thinking, and relationship building. Let's dive into each of them, because I want to understand what makes each of these pillars and how can we stimulate more of these three in our teams to be more resilient.
I mean, I have worked on the idea of creativity and knowledge management since 2011, and I'm gradually putting pieces together, and worked with some folks here in Germany that had written a book called Creative Company. And they talked about that, about artistic practices and artistic attitudes and the things that we can learn from being an artist. And then I talked to someone else about sustainable leadership and knowledge management. And I hadn't really heard a lot about sustainable leadership. And so I looked at it and I'm like, well, but these are all the same behaviors that we learn from tapping into our inner artist. And I was like, oh, well, isn't this interesting that in our rush to be analytical and rational, and process oriented and turn everything into a manufacturing line, we have educated out of ourselves their creativity, and our creativity is what informs our sustainability and helps makes us sustainable leaders and helps us see the bigger picture, and look at the relationships between things or among things, and have a systems view of it all. And so in our specialization, we've optimized what's in the box and not optimized the system as a whole.
What makes it sustainable for you?
Things like, well, making the right decisions. So recognizing how something we might be doing in our organization impacts the environment. It's not so easy as, I'm just going to extract this oil from the ground or this metal from the ground, or I'm just going to manufacture this, whatever my business is, I'm just going to do this. And I don't have to worry about the waste. I don't have to worry about the environmental impact and the bigger picture of that, how this impacts, the communities where the manufacturing is happening or the extraction from the natural resources is happening. Those have impacts. And so many organizations that are in those fields aren't considering it or doing the sort of the minimum amount, or will say, oh, well, it's too hard to calculate, so we're not going to. And it's interesting to me because of my accounting background, like when I took those classes in my undergrad, I remember them saying, that if you're building a gas station, you have to include the cost of returning that site to the way that it was.
Yes.
When you sell it or when you rip it down or whatever, that's got to be built into it. But what seems to have happened is that people have gone, oh, well, the government will take care of that, or it's too hard to calculate, or, I wouldn't make this decision if I had to really calculate how to return the site to the way that it was. So I'm not going to do it, and just say, oh, I can't measure it, so I'm not going to do it. But the truth is you can probably measure it, or if you could, the bits that you can measure would make it not profitable to do that. And so they find some reason to say, oh, well, we're not going to do that because it's too hard.
It's a delicate balance for sure, especially in fast-moving industries, especially in startups. That it's all about that 10x growth at least. So there's a huge pressure to return on the investment. And the thing is, you don't really know what you're doing because by definition, you are trying to find a sustainable, viable business model. You don't know exactly who your customers are because there's still a lot of trial and error. You have an idea, you have the embryo of a product. And that's true in a startup, but it's true also in an established organization that's trying to innovate. They might have a small agile team within it that's trying to create new products. There's always pressure, right? Money is limited and time is limited. And so you can spend all your time thinking about the implications of every single thing you do, or you can spend time doing them, or there's maybe a sweet spot in between where it's not the two extremes, it's something there's more balance there. What made you sort of to realize that there was a connection between the artistic attitude, the way that you mention it, and this awareness of the bigger picture?
I think artists, do take a step back and look at the bigger picture in creating their works and looking at what's available to create what they're doing. I think artists by nature question, and see the interrelatedness of things in a way that a lot of people don't. For whatever reason, I think that there's a flexibility with art, the possibilities, and so there's some, there's also an understanding. Well, if I put paint here, that's going to impact, the balance of the picture, or if I put I build something a certain way, it's going to impact the things around it, because there's the environment around it. So if I'm building a piece of public art, how is that going to interact with the buildings around it, and the people in the space? And I think by nature, yeah, artists take a bigger picture, take a more systemic look at things.
And it could be a painting, it could be a sculpture, it could be a data set, it could be a machine learning model, it could be any
dance, could be theater, could be, yeah, all kinds of things.
Interesting. It reminds me of a recent conversation with Brian O'Neill. We talked about user experience design, design thinking, and the process of asking, what does it feel to be the user of a product, whatever the product? Again, you know, a painting or a machine learning algorithm, anything that's trying to solve a problem. You think about an artist essentially as someone that asks, why are we doing this? And what would happen if we didn't, or if we changed the way we're doing this? So that questioning is the beginning of the artistic process.
Yeah, or I want to convey a particular message. How am I going to do that using the mediums that I have available to me? I look at my own painting practice, and a few years ago now, I wanted to express in a series of paintings the idea of opening up, and I thought, okay, so my medium is paint and canvas, and and acrylic paints, and I have all these tools and things that I can use, and but what says opening up? How am I going to express that using paint? And what opens up? Zippers open up, Velcro fasteners open up, buttons open up. I made a little list of things that open up. How can I put this in a painting? And I ended up exploring with buttons and zippers and putting sewing zippers into my paintings. I was throwing them onto pieces of canvas. And so I think, artists just look at the world differently and see some of those things, and aren't so afraid to borrow from other disciplines. The zippers, that's sewing.
Doesn't matter. No. Yeah.
It is crazy, but it works, and it gets the message across.
There's another message that's really important in your papers that struck me, and is particularly, it got me interested because I was looking for a connection between creativity and the artistic attitude and this thing that you mentioned a couple of times, and it's about sustainability through sharing and resharing instead of creating again and again and again. Another way to say it is information silo. There's a million ways to say the same thing, but it's, for whatever reason, the process of recreating things, assets, pieces of information, models, data sets. Why do we do that instead of recreating? What's the cost of sharing? And can we really expect an organization to achieve maximum sharing?
Well, I think in sharing, it becomes more sustainable and more innovative, that I don't have to learn that first part that somebody else has already learned. I can take what they've done and either use it as it is, or go, oh, this builds on, or this fits in this piece. I'm going to use that as a launch pad, a stepping off point, and build on that, rather than, I don't have to recreate the wheel every time. I think there's a mindset that's necessary that people get in the it's just easier for me to recreate the wheel than it is to go out and see what else somebody else has done already that I might be able to leverage. Or I might think that my problem is special for some reason, and so nobody's done it before, and I'm not, I'm just going to do it myself. It's lazy thinking, at least from my perspective, because there's lots of interesting things going on, and people doing lots of research and doing lots of interesting things that I can learn from. And that's, in building Radical KM, I've just put other people's pieces together in a different way to create a different picture out of it. and that's what's unique about it. I think there was also a timing aspect of it, but the connection, especially the connection between creativity and sustainability and knowledge management, those sort of three cornerstones of it are unique, but in their own right, those are three things that exist completely on their own.
Yeah.
You know, it's the connection, the white space of the recognizing that there's similarities between them and that they can be used, you know, synergistically together, rather than going, oh no, that's not knowledge management. It has that little, I'm in my sustainable leadership box. I'm just going to stay in that. I'm going to ignore everything else. I'm not going to play with anybody else. I'm just going to stay in my sustainable leadership box. Well, that's not very sustainable of you, really, to make that decision. So sustainability is about, you know, doing things so that they can continue, not recreating the wheel all the time.
Yeah, and we love putting people in boxes, don't we? There was an interesting talk on TED about I think they're called multi-potentialites or polymaths, you know, people that are passionate about different disciplines, and they spend their lives jumping from topic to topic, domain to domain. They never want to specialize too much on one thing because they're always wondering, what am I missing out? And the way that I'm saying it sounds like FOMO, but it's really not just the fear of missing out, is a genuine interest in learning different things. So that curiosity that drives you to explore. And yeah, the word can be a bit of you know, not super welcoming for people like that, because there's a tendency to specialize. And now in that VUCA environment that you mentioned, yes, we need the engineers, we need the doers, we need the absolute specialists, because sometimes you just need to get a job done as fast and as efficient as possible. And that calls for, you know, top expertise, someone that knows immediately how to solve a problem. But there are other situations where that doesn't work at all. So we need to combine these two. And I want to dive with you into what happens at the intersection between these two ways of thinking within the same person. If you feel like sharing your own relationship with these two parts, you know, you have a business, so you need to measure stuff, but you're also an artist, you paint, you think non-linearly. How do you reconcile these two? And first inside yourself, then I share a story of my own struggle with reconciling these two parts, and then I want to extend that argument into organizations.
I think we do need to allow it to a certain extent in everyone. I think there are some people that, you know, are rightly placed to focus on it as the majority, but I look at it as of their day. But I think that we all benefit, organizations benefit, we as individuals benefit by tapping into both of those parts of us in a work setting, in our lives in general. And I think that that's what I've done with my situation, with my art and my consulting. And I was recently asked if my painting was a hobby, and it was all I could do not to jump down the person's throat. And they meant it well enough, you know. It was an innocent enough question. No, it's not a hobby, you know. And
sorry
was
if I'm
very
laughing, but this resonates so much because it happened very similar thing last week to me, and I felt the same. So interesting.
Yeah, and I kind of said, you know, the art informs my consulting practice. You know, they're not separable to me. Yes, I have art exhibitions and I make some money from my art, not enough to live on. But I don't know, for me, I feel like I need both things because my life informs my art. So I need to not be in that silo, in that box. I need to be doing things and interacting in the world that I exist in, and that world I exist in is, you know, with my education, is a business world. And so, but I think that the value is in integrating those and bringing them both together. So I do pure knowledge management, and by pure I mean people, process, and technology focused knowledge management and focus on that. But I also have radical KM that I bring in the creativity piece with, and I have the art that, you know, the galleries, you know, and the exhibitions I've had, they don't care about my consulting practice, and that's fine. And some of my clients don't care about my art practice, although they benefit from it in the workshops and how I run the workshops and how I approach, you know, the deliverables and the things that the work that I do for them. Yeah,
So
there's a
you're for mixing the two in every individual instead of creating two separate functions, sort of. Yeah, it makes a ton of sense, because that would create also a lot of stress. But sometimes it's hard to reconcile them. So maybe the approach is, yes, to develop both of them, but also realize that it's a luxury to be able to do art and also make it sustainable. And so I always think about that conversation with the CFO. I imagine myself at a bar with a coffee in my hand, looking at a CFO and, you know, looking at me talking about creativity, and they talk about numbers, and you're like, well, it's non-linear, it's very useful, it's needed, you know, but can I put a number on it? Not really.
Yeah, there are numbers, there are case studies, you know, all too often, though, they get dismissed, you know. And I think of a particular case study I talk about with the radical KM and stuff, and that I mentioned in the articles, and at least 2 of the articles, because it was something that was done by a KM team, and they brought in arts-based interventions into the organization, and they had great success with it. They created a studio space. They solved problems that they hadn't been able to solve. They improved the collaboration and the knowledge flow between teams in the organization, and, you know, and everybody, word got out into the rest of the organization, and everybody wanted to do it and use the studio space and take advantage of it. It was successful. They had the numbers, and yet there was a reorg, and the organization shut the whole thing down because the numbers didn't matter. I'm guessing here, reading a bit between the lines from the case study that I read, because it's not work that I did, but reading between the lines a little bit, whoever came in and was in charge then of the KM team just didn't get it. And so shut it down. And I've seen that. I've worked in, like I say, knowledge management for 25 years. I've seen it. I wouldn't even care to guess how many times I've seen it. The KM and the activities that they're doing in the organization support it, but a new VP comes in and they don't understand, or they don't care, or they don't get it somehow. It doesn't matter that there actually are numbers that the organization has benefited. They shut it down because they look at it and go, oh, well, that's touchy-feely stuff.
They feel uncomfortable themselves, yeah, and they project that feeling into the decisions they make.
Yeah. They look at the numbers a lot of times, and I look at some work that I did early on in my KM career, and the numbers were high, like 180, 160, 180% return on investment. You know, and management looked at it and went, no. You know, because when you're talking about fixed assets, you're talking about returns on investment around 12%, 18%, 20%, 25%, like way below 100. So, but the thing with knowledge is that it multiplies when you share it. It's exponential. The growth, you know, the sharing and learning, that's exponential growth. It's not, oh, I'm going to use this asset a little bit better, and so I get, I know, another 1%. I'm going to use my knowledge a little bit better, and it impacts everyone down the chain. And this is how you end up with these really high returns on investment. And management looks at it and goes, oh, well, you're making that up, because there's no way we could have that kind of return on investment on something that's not tangible. You know, because they're used to tangible assets, right?
What are the types of customers that approach you, and how do you know whether they're a good fit for the principles of radical KM knowledge management?
I think anybody that has some kind of existing knowledge management program. And, so that they understand the concepts of knowledge management, and they're looking at doing something. They've recognized the need because of the pandemic largely that they need to do something different, that the ways that the things that they've been doing for knowledge management are just not enough anymore. That we're doing this hybrid work thing, that people are stressed out, that they're not getting, the innovation that they need. They need something new. And so it's, in many cases, the KM team is somehow being tasked with bringing innovation and creativity into the organization. And the KM team just doesn't know what to do or how to do it or where to start even. And so those are the people that find me, that go, oh, I found your paper, which is I'm so glad I had managed to get 3 papers published in the last year, because so many people find me because of they Google, and find the papers and find me and find my LinkedIn and, my webpage and whatever. And it's like, oh, this is really cool. You found me because of the paper. So
yeah, it pays off to sit down and write our ideas, in a neatly concise and good way. What's the Bird Island workshop?
I haven't figured out a way to do it remotely or virtually yet, so I haven't been able to do it during the pandemic. But it's a game. It takes a couple of hours, and it really just teaches people, takes them through the learning process from the sort of the after action review. So they're given a task. What happens are they're given a task, and then they do an after action review as a team. And so they think about how they might improve their processes and things they would do differently next time and things. And so we record, make notes of those sort of process improvement kind of things based on their own experience. And then we do a peer assist activity, which is another knowledge management activity. And so one person will go from one team to another team. So there's this exchange between teams, and they hear about what happened on the other team and things that the other team learned and experienced. And so then they do this next round of sort of estimation of, well, if now what I know from what I learned and from what this other team, what I've learned from the other team, I would do these things differently, and I could build my tower, this much higher, given that, I know this stuff. And then the workshop has actually been going on for more than 20 years at this point. So there's a lot of data, which is what was in the article that I published on it. But and so we share best practices. So this is across 20 years of experience of teams doing this exercise and how to build it and things. And this is exponential. This goes from, maybe the first tower that they built was 50 centimeters tall, and they guess with the process improvements, they'll get to maybe 100. When we share the best practices, they go 250.
Yeah.
Which is doable because we have the data. We've seen, teams build that high, and so this when we do this sort of this phased approach through our own learning process and the peer assist and the best practices sharing, and see how much that goes up, from 50 to 250, people all of a sudden go, oh, now I know why I should share. Now I know why I should look at best practices and lessons learned and peer assists, and why this is important, because this is the kind of impact that I can have on my organization, on my stakeholders, on my customers, whatever the purpose is.
That's a brilliant way to influence the culture of the organization and try to bring home that message that sharing is not just caring. Sharing is we all win tenfold or more if we do.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and all that in like 2 hours. The workshop takes about 2 hours. So to go from, I've seen senior managers come in, and wonder what we're doing with all these blocks and things that are on the table, and really, doubtful about the purpose of what this is. And after 2 hours, have them go, now I get it. Now,
Yeah.
I recognize I'm going to support the KM team, and we're going to do this right.
There was a paper that I shared on LinkedIn, I believe it was on HBR, Harvard Business Review, by Angus Fletcher, the 3 exercises to boost your team's creativity. He was making the point that a lot of the creativity training stuff is actually not as effective as we would like to think, even though it's $1 billion industry. Apparently, I didn't know. So there's a lot of demand there. What was your take home from that article, if you remember what the article was all about, and how do you think in general about creativity training?
I recall liking the article. It was really speaking about creative thinking, and which is often where people head to with when they start talking about creativity in a business sense, in a business context, is that creative thinking, and that ties into design thinking and user-centered design and all these things, which are important. I don't want to sound like I don't think they're important. They are, but my thinking on it is that there's something that informs or that enables the creative thinking, and that's not being trained because it's not logical, and this is the arts-based intervention stuff that I talk about. It's not logical, and yet playing those games, if that's what we want to call the arts-based interventions, and there's different things to do around that. I tend to focus on the painting because that's part of me and my practice, but I do bring in improv or scribble drawings and photography and sculpture and things as well. And it's sort of training ourselves or allowing ourselves to play and explore using something that's, I'm going to say, non-threatening in a way, although lots of people have bad experiences with art in public school and in school, and so there's, I've had those people come into the workshops and freak out when they see the painting and the paints and stuff on the table,
Yeah, I'm terrible at this stuff. Yeah,
I'm not an artist, I'm gonna leave, and it's always, talk them down and create a safe space for them, the psychological safety, and we just have fun. We're not trying to create something, we're not trying to put a play on Broadway, or get a painting in the Louvre. We're just having some fun, seeing what the paint does, seeing what we can, do with the improv games, what silly stories we can make up, whatever it is, because the lessons that come out of those activities are transferable, and the confidence that comes out of those activities, like getting brown in your yellow paint and figuring out how to incorporate that and keep going and not have realize that the floor is not going to open up and swallow you whole because you got brown in your yellow paint, and the world is going to end. It's not going to end. Let's figure out, mistakes happen. Let's figure out how to go forward. And this idea, this curiosity of, oh, I just ran this survey, or I ran this, did this thing at work and it didn't go the way I thought it was going to go, and I failed. No, you've not failed. You've learned something, and so build on that. What did you learn? What are you going to do differently next time? So this is the art stuff is a way to get people to do that takes them out of their comfort zones and opens up some possibilities that might not be opened up otherwise.
Super cool. We're fast approaching the end of the time that we allocated for this, and I'm perhaps as a last question, I want to ask you, how can people get in touch with you? What's the first point of contact?
You can go to radicalkm.com is the easiest way. That'll go to my website, and you can get in touch with me there. There's a link there for my LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, certainly, Stephanie Barnes on LinkedIn. I'm sure there's lots of Stephanie Barneses, but Stephanie Barnes, I think my LinkedIn URL is Stephanie A. Barnes on the end of the LinkedIn.com thing. So yeah, you find me that way, or yeah, just Google Radical KM. You'll find me. So
too easy. We'll
yeah.
add obviously a link in the show notes as usual. So if you guys are interested, check that out. And there's a bunch of papers that I read to prep this one. I'll include links to those as well. I believe 2 are open access, but they require an account, a free account. Anyways, I mean, if you're interested, you can just reach out to Stephanie. I'm sure she can send you a copy of those papers right away. Yeah. Stephanie, thank you so much for your time, and looking forward to our next chat soon.
Yep, you're welcome, and thank you for having me. It was fun.
Pleasure. Cheers. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this episode. I hope this means you found the content useful and relevant. There is a lot happening right now over at Discovering Data. We're working on a new series of live events, more amazing guests, and we're starting to plant the seeds for a future conference. If you want to stay in the know, you have options. Hop on discoveringdata.com and subscribe to our list, or share your knowledge and make new friends by joining our circle. And that's all I've got for now. A big ciao from Sydney, Australia, and I'll see you in the next episode of Discovering Data.